Thank you for being here. I hope that with this session give you an introduction to web performance. And so currently I'm not really talking as from Nia's point of view, but I will touch it a bit, but mostly about a performance point of view. So it's really to give you a head start on how to do web performance and why you should consider and optimize web performance. There's quite a lot to cover, and I have a lot of slides, so it might be quick and we might have time for questions, but I'll be around and stuff. So on. Here we go. So just a short introduction about me to start with. Go over why performance matters. Then we go over some different aspects of performance, so that is server response and browser rendering. We also talk about how you can cheat and what you can do to supercharge. And we talk a bit about performance project before we talk a bit further about what lies ahead. And then we wrap up. My name is Aske, and I'm a full stack developer, or at least I consider myself that, and I'm pretty passionate about user experience. Let me tell you why that is relevant here. Because performance matters. It's really important. One of the main reasons that performance matters is that the user experience is closely tied to performance. So if you have a bad performance, you have a bad user experience. And nobody likes to wait for a page for a long time. And it also influences bounce rates, conversion rates, and how many page views you get if it's not loading fast enough. It's hurting your search ranking, search engine ranking. So Google is now giving you a penalty for not being performant. It's also very important because of mobile. Mobile is on the rise. And cost in some countries, especially in the developing countries, cost is actually an issue. Or if you have many visitors, you can save some money by optimizing. So this is just like an example of two websites. One of them is optimized, and one of them is not as optimized. They're both pretty okay, but this is like the experience that the user have. So you see this one, it's quite quick. You can actually see what's going on. And the other one is not as quick. If we take it again, you see this one is very fast at showing the actual content, what the text and stuff. And the other one takes a long time and shows a lot of stuff that's not really like what it is about. It's images and stuff, but what is it? There, you get it later. And the thing is that we as humans are quite impatient. Our attention span is not that long, and so there's like a few the rule of thumb that you can use, which is 0.1 second is instant. That feels like instantaneous to us. 1 second is quick. 10 seconds is slow. And more than 10, you're thinking about something else, or you already left. And there's like statistics for this. So if you're consumers, you have like 57% who leave the page if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. This might vary where you're from and how patient you are. And in general, 40% will will just leave your site if it's not loading fast enough. And as I said before, Google is really keen on web performance. They're doing a lot to improve it, and it's actually giving penalties to everyone who's not doing something about it. And their ideal is that your page loads in less than a second, which is kind of hard to achieve with complex websites, but you can get fairly close, but it does require some work to do. The next point is mobile is exploding at the moment, especially in developing countries. There's a lot of mobile-only users, and they are on a mobile connection, and on mobile, web performance is even worse because you have longer latency, because the cell tower is, the connection to the cell tower is slower than to if it goes over cable. And actually, mobile has surpassed the amount of desktop users. So it's just why it's becoming even more important than before. And another thing is that the average page size is actually growing. So a few years ago, they were almost half of what the average page size is today, and that's primarily because of images and also script. So it's a lot of JavaScript going on and bigger images and stuff like that. So combine that with mobile, and you have an even worse experience. And it's not uncommon to have pages that loads in 10 or 20 or even 30 seconds, which is horrible. If you're not really keen on the content on the web page, you stop using it. So maybe you think it's okay for you or your customers, but really it's not, because your competitor might be better, so they go there instead. And talking about costs, if you don't have a flat rate internet, then loading your page, which is probably not that important, can cost a lot of money in some countries, depending on it. And so, yeah, talking a bit about web performance. So, web is not performing by default. This is actually a big problem in the sense that you always have to do something to have good performance. There's no default, it's just good. So that's why when you're building something, you have to consider it. And you should be considering throughout the whole process. So from beginning to the end, and not just as an afterthought. It's much easier if you do it while implementing and not afterwards, because you have to change a lot of stuff to do it. Yeah, so fortunately there are some great tools out there. There are two that I personally use. There are more, but it should suffice with these, let's say. So get to know these because they're great. First one is PageSpeed Insights. And what you do is you type in your URL, and it automatically, in less than 10 seconds, probably a few seconds, it usually takes, it gives you a very useful report of your status of the page. And it groups them in different categories. So you have should fix, consider fixing, and stuff that is already fixed. You also have mobile and you have desktop. So you can actually see how it performs on mobile and how it performs on desktop. There are some differences there. For instance, on mobile, it also accounts for usability. So if you have things that you click which are not big enough for a finger, to click, it tells you. So the goal, I'd say, is to have different colors here. So this one is 52. That's pretty bad. It could be worse. I've seen worse. And if you improve it a bit more, you get, I think, the changes from 60 up. You get like a yellow score, and if you have more than 90, you have a green score. And getting to a green score is usually enough, I'd say. You can spend a lot of time optimizing stuff, but usually the gain does not necessarily outweigh the cost when you get above those 90-ish when you get a green score. Another thing about it is that this changes over time, so their evaluation of your site might change. They do that because maybe something like this high criteria, or this another way of doing stuff, or a new technology is there that you have to consider. So you have to actually check this once in a while to make sure that your projects still performance. Another tool, I need to speed up. Another tool is WebPagetest. Another thing where you type in the URL and it gives you a result. They have a few different. Numbers that you get. So you have the group by first view, which is without having anything in the cache. Then you have the repeat view, which is after the first time you have visited it. And it has load time, it has time to first byte, which is how long it takes for the server to give the first data back, and how long it takes before it starts rendering the page. Then you have the speed index, which is a score, the lower the better. Again, less than 1,000 is ideal. Less than 2,000 is doable usually. It's pretty hard to do to get less than 1,000. And then you have timings like document complete, full complete. They even have like costs, so you can see like this is a 2 megabyte page. How much would this cost in somewhere where they don't have flat rate inside? Yeah, and they have these film strip and view things, which are really great to compare. So when you're actually optimizing, you can make a report, and then you change something, and then you can make a new one, and you can see the difference. And also visually, so they have this film strip view where you kind of see so the time, how much is loaded, and you have this graph of the same. And yeah, to explain the speed index, you see these two. So this one has bad score, this one has good score, and that is because this one is almost visually complete after 1 second, and this one takes 11 seconds to be visually complete. And there's a calculation for that, but basically it's because it's goes like this, and the other one like that. One thing to note here is that this score, you cannot really compare between stuff because it depends on how you're testing which browser. You can choose that, which connection, stuff like that. So, but you can use it if you run the same test on the same site multiple times, and you can see the progress when you're actually up. So coming to server response, that's really important because that's delivering all the data for the users. There are some stuff that you can do which have like high impact, and some that have medium and low, and compared to how much time it takes and effort, you have to choose which one to do when. So Some quick rules is get a hosted that has SSD instead of a normal hard disk. And it gives some improvements. Use Nginx instead of Apache. Apache is also pretty fast, but in my experience, Nginx is a bit better, especially in memory consumption. Then a big win is utilizing PHP, newer PHP versions. Soon we have PHP 7 coming out, which will bring huge improvements. But until then, at least use the latest of 5 branch and use it with PHP npm instead of the regular one, because it's more performant, like 3 times or something. So yeah, let's tell your server guys to do something, because you don't have to change your code for it. Next one that you will see is that you should optimize your images. That is because when images are saved, they're not really saved in a very compressed way. They have a lot of unnecessary metadata, and they are also not compressed by default very good. So you can optimize them by running them through some programs, which will output visually exactly the same quality, but the size will be much smaller. Another thing you should do is use SVG. So SVG is a vector format. So if it's a logo without bitmap graphics, then use SVG, unless it's really, really small. But the good thing about SVG is that you have one size and it fits all sizes. So it looks very good on high resolution displays and big screens, but it also works fine on smaller screens. Another thing is replace PNGs with JPEGs. PNGs are usually a lot larger unless you save them in a small bitrate like GIFs. And you can do that unless they're transparent. So yeah, always consider doing that and stop using PNGs for like images or something like that. It's really bad practice. There are some tools. ImageUpGo is an online one called SVG Editor. You can like visually drop something in and start compressing and see if it looks the same still. So if you have a Mac, there's like a program that you can use where you just drag and drop and it does it for you. It's very easy. You can just drop the whole folder. If you use Linux or something like that, you can install it with on the command line and just do the same. It's very convenient, and this is something you should do when you create a website. So all the static assets, meaning all the images that are in the templates and stuff, you should run through something like this, because you can save quite a lot. The next thing is go back a bit. You have the system resources, which are the images that the users upload for the CMS and stuff. And for Flow and Yes, I've created a package that helps you do this, so you don't have to figure out how to do this, because it's not that easy to do. So basically, it's a package that you install, and then you have to make sure that the libraries are there, and then it just automatically optimizes all of the images that people upload. And it works on all platforms, and depending on your server and stuff, you can optimize different formats. Yeah. So use that if you use Neos. I recommend. Next thing is serving scaled images. So serving, what this means is when you have a responsive website, you have the same image on the desktop version and the mobile version, and it's way too big for the mobile. So what you should do is make use of something called screenset, which is a new HTML5 technology, which is not supported everywhere, but there is polyfill, so it works in all the browsers and in IE. So it's becoming the standard, and it's good to use. It's not going to change then. At some point, when browsers all adopt it, you don't need polyfill anymore, and it just works. Yeah, so this can give you, like, if you might have a really bad score on mobile, but not necessarily as bad on desktop, and this might be one of the things that it's complaining about, that you're serving really big images for small devices. Yeah. So look into that, it's quite easy. So I have an example of how you can do that with NIAS, and it also works in Carbon3. It's just a little bit different, but the concept is the same. You basically use the image here helpers and add a new attribute with, in this case, it's a higher resolution image. So it's like 400 and 200, the original, and that outputs this. And then you have the fallback for browsers that don't support it. Yeah, it's pretty convenient and very flexible. I know in Carbon3 there's also built-in things to do this, but in NIAS there isn't. And personally, I like the flexibility more and being in control than I like something that just does something that might be right and not necessarily. Because it really depends on where the image is viewed and the context. So the next thing is font size. Fonts are being used in more and more projects. It's pretty high. It's like 60% or something of new websites, and they take up a lot of. They have a large font size, so to download these takes a while, and there's a problem because when you add the font, the whole page will not render until the font is loaded. If you just include it with like the default way of doing it. So that might lead to having a blank screen for 10 seconds, and then at 11 seconds, everything is there. And that's not a good user experience. So what you should rather do is, basic stuff up here, but what you should rather do is make sure they load asynchronously, and you should also use the optimized format. So currently the optimized formats are WAF and WAF2, and this works in a couple of new browsers. This works in almost all browsers. And if it doesn't work, then it's probably okay that the font is not displayed. So that would be upper midi, stuff like that. And you can remove unnecessary characters, so you strip the file size down. And yeah, if you do self-hosting, you can eliminate a simple point of failure, which is if the font, like Typekit is a font hosting service, if their server is not responding or it's slow, it makes your site slow. And that should be avoided at all costs. So that's like a general practice. Stop using CDNs because they can crash your site and they're not reliable. Instead, host stuff yourself, because the time that you save from maybe someone having the same file cache somewhere from another site is very low. So yeah, it's not a good yeah. So just to see, like, give you an overview of the mod format, and it's just about anything except IE 8. So if you still have to support that browser, then you need another fallback on another format, but that's quite easy to add. In Europe, it's usually not needed to support IE 8. WAF2 is also on Android and Chrome and Firefox, so it's easy to add, so just do that. Next thing is domain sharding. So there's a limitation in browsers that say you can only download 6 files at the same time per domain on average. And it might be a bit different on the browser, but that's the average. Which means that if you have everything on one domain, it takes quite a while if you have a lot of files. Because it has to wait for the other one to, for the first ones to finish, and then on and on. Therefore, people use domain sharding. And what it means is you have multiple domains. And it's usually referred to as using a CDN. But there's a fairly new studies are showing that you should only use 2. You should never use more than 2, because for every new domain, there's also a delay for the lookup in the handshake for this HTTPS stuff. So yeah, but yeah, so use 2 if you can. It might take some setup to do, but I know in NIAS 2.0 we actually have the possibility of using CNs out of the box, so it should be easier to do. Another thing is, if you use a CN, they sometimes provide hosting in different areas of the world. So if you have a site that has videos from all over, it's a good thing to have that, because then it's a shorter distance for people who are far away from the original server. So yeah, that brings performance as well. So another thing in NIAS particularly is cache backends. There are some situations where the default is not performant either. And to make it performant, you have to use a memory cache backend instead of files. And one case where it's like where you see it is when you edit stuff in the backend and you have a lot of content, like a lot of pages and stuff. So therefore, you use rinse or memcached for those specific caches. Yeah, so if you use NIAS flow to do this, or you can also use MySQL or Postgres or SQLite, but it's not as straightforward. So content cache optimization. It's not on this one. And what it is if you have multiple layouts in your templates, you might have the same stuff for multiple pages. So you might load exactly the same header for more pages. And to not render that on every request, you can use the content cache to say this is the same. It only changes if the workspace changes. So if you log in, and yeah, so that might speed up things. You can do this in multiple parts if you have the same menu on every page and stuff like that. You should always use the content cache to not render everything every time. So we're halfway there, and we've used 28 minutes, so speed up a bit. So these are a couple of warnings that you get when you use those tools. It's a leverage cross caching, and what it means is what you should do is make sure that the browser gets the files with the right headers, so you tell them to allow them to cache the files. And just for your information, I will share this afterwards, so don't worry about it. This is already taking notes, but this is quite fast. But what you should tell it is, for instance, JavaScript files and images can cache for a week, because otherwise it will fetch them every time, and usually the same resources are used multiple times. And then you need to add this accept encoding headers, because if you use CDN, that's needed. So they usually always say, just make sure you do this. Achieving this is very, very easy, because there are standouts that you can just copy paste for generics, for Apache, ISS, and a lot is there. So just use that. It's from the HTML5 boilerplate project, so they have really great and up-to-date and working on all environments. The same for cache validator. I'm not going to go into details of what this is, but it's another copy-paste piece of config, and then that warning goes away. Then you should enable compression of static assets. So that is delivering an image or a JavaScript file or a font or something like that. If you enable compression, then it's transferring it much more compressed than it would otherwise. And that means it's a smaller file, and there's this decompress on this right side. So it's also another very easy thing to do, and it has a really high impact. So, another thing is to Minify CSS and JavaScript, and it has a high impact, it has a medium cost, which means it does take a while to do. But once you have this set up, you can use the same setup for all your projects. That's what I've been doing for quite a while. So to do this, you should use tools like Grunt or Broccoli. They have a lot of tools to do this. They're really great. It's the industry standard, and they're always up to date, works in environments or something like that. So if we have a reference to NIAS here, it's on purpose that it's not built in, because we believe that the way that it's done in free is the legacy way of doing it, and it shouldn't be done. So where the CMS actually does this for you, because it gives you a lot less control, and the tools are a lot worse than these standardized tools. Also, if you use these, it's the same if you go to any other project that it's not a CMS, for instance. This is an example of that. And what it kind of does is you run something on the Inline while developing, and it creates a minified version of your file. It can remove stuff. Here it's running auto prefixer, which is adding all the backwards compatibility versions of CSS tags or CSS rules. So the WebKit, the Opera, the IE, it's very convenient because then you have clear CSS. And it also creates source maps. So if you're debugging in browser and you enable source maps, you can actually see even like where the rules are, even though it's Minify, so that's very useful. So, font loading, I talked a bit about it before, but make sure that you load them asynchronous, and also make sure, like, what this prevents is the flash of invisible text, and also render blocking the whole page. So there are some fairly new techniques to prevent this, and what it is like the whole page renders with the text, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. And that's like, it feels weird, so it's poor user experience. And you can do something about it by using font events, and there's a great article on that here. But it's like really, if you're optimizing everything, you might do this. Another thing is to defer parsing on JavaScript. So this is another way to prevent render blocking. So with my page, and to do that, you add the async or optionally the defer attribute to the tag. So like this, and what it does is it doesn't wait to render the whole page until this is loaded, which it would by default. So if you have something that's not changing anything on the page, so if you have like progressive enhancement or adding click events to stuff, you can do it like this because it's not needed to actually render the page. So everything that's not needed to render the page, do this. There's a small but, which is avoid having multiple if you have dependencies. So if one script depends on another, it becomes tricky, which is why one file makes it easier. There's also a thing about critical and non-critical JavaScript, so that comes back to this. So you might have stuff that is needed to render the page. So one example would be if you have cards and they need to be laid out in a certain way. You might use something like masonry, it's a popular library, and that's a critical one because it's needed for the render. But clicking on those and what happens when you click on those might not be, so you might split that up. Again, this is where you run into those dependency issues. This is a great library to do this. It's fairly simple. Then we have something called progressive jpegs. And basically, it changes, this is the default, so you lower it a little bit, it's very hard to see here, but this is like back quality, medium, and good quality. And it prevents the whole page from jumping when the images are loaded. And it also, it's visible faster. So you have like a header, you have an image, and very quickly make out what the context is. Where this might be this, and then something completely different further down. To achieve this, you can either save the images in Photoshop or use a library as CLI or Inline tool called jpegs, or it's actually built into the image optimizer as well, so you can enable that. Next thing you might see is you should minify and Gzip HTML. It might be a bit tricky to do with a CMS, but yeah, it's doable. I haven't done it yet, but I might at some point. It's a medium impact, it's not too much. Another tip is to avoid inline scripts. It's a bad practice. Sometimes you need it for instance, those load CSS and load JS stuff. You do inline and put them in the top because they're important for loading the whole page. But in general, you should avoid it. And there's one in Neos by default. And you can, what you can do is you can take that snippet and move it in your own script, and then put it together with all the other Minify stuff that you have. So, yeah, that's how you do that. So you don't get that warning, because those warnings are really annoying. Another thing you can do, which has a high impact but a high cost, it's easier to do if you do it from the beginning. There are some techniques to do that, but that is critical and non-critical CSS. It's more than just CSS. So this is the critical part. This is what you see above the fold. It's called. This is what's not. So to achieve a page load less than a second, you have to make use of this. And what you do is you inline some CSS in the header, and you maybe strip some scripts and load everything else asynchronously, and also maybe not too much content. Yeah, there are some tools to do this. But yeah, so you can see the difference here. Before it's done and after. So I think it's still there. So here you have the critical CSS implement, and you see that the whole page and what it's about in less than a second. And the other one you have is not that big of a difference though, but you have this like after a second, and you don't see anything here. On some pages, this is like not 0.2 seconds difference, but 8 or 9 seconds difference. This is quite a lot. So there are some limitations when you're optimizing performance. And some common ones are external libraries and tools. So Facebook is pretty annoying, for instance. And the share buttons, and if you have like images of profiles, they're not optimized there images for some weird reason. I don't know why. It's not. And it's the same for Twitter actually. And Google Analytics can also, or Civic or something like that, can also hurt it. But sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to have these things, and then you can optimize everything else. But just be aware that having one of these things might mean that a lot of other things doesn't make sense, because it's just hurting in general so much that whatever else you do is not going to mean a difference. So this might cause the whole page to take a few seconds longer or more to load. I usually advise clients not to make use of this. If you can, then use asynchronous buttons and stuff like that, because that you can optimize, and it's very. You can also load everything asynchronously, which you should always do, but it still hurts performance. So yeah,